All right, then let's go ahead and get started. So today what we're going to talk about are credit cards. And um, there's a lot of details to deal with credit cards, and we're going to try and keep focused on things that seem consistent with this class, right? Uh, how is interest computed? Minimum payments, things like that. Okay, so the way a credit card works as a financial object, okay, is that every time that you swipe your credit card, you're effectively taking out a loan. And the idea is rather than going through the whole process of a loan every time we want to use it, they say, well, we want you to use this frequently. We'll just create the terms once at the beginning, and those will be your terms every time you use your credit card. Okay, so then you can use a credit card over and over again, and there's no, everything is seamless and automatic. Okay, and the way in which credit card seems a little bit different from a loan. When you take out a loan, you borrow a bunch of money, and then you make payments to pay it back until it's down to zero. With a credit card, it's different because they don't really ever expect you to be done using it. They want you to kind of perpetually use it. So maybe you use it and pay it off every month, maybe use it and carry a balance every month, but either way, there's a different sort of feeling than a loan because the credit card never has any like requirement that you pay it off like it's a loan. They just want you to keep making payments on it, right? Okay. So what we're going to do when we look at a credit card is not look at like the full term of a loan, like, a 10 or 20-year loan for a house. We're going to look at it sort of month by month and see what's going on. Okay, so there's a few things I want to talk about. First of all, is the grace period. With most credit cards, if you pay your full balance every month, they don't charge you any interest. Okay. Now, one of the things that made me that this sort of made me curious about, I thought if everyone behaved financially responsible, if everyone paid off their credit card every month, how would the credit card company make any money, right? They still have employees and stuff. They have to make money. And it turns out credit cards charge people on both ends. They charge you interest, but they also charge the vendor something every time you use it. So it's usually somewhere between 1 and 2% of the purchase price, but every time you buy something with a credit card charges the vendor a percentage of that sale, of that transaction. Okay. So even if they never made a single cent off of you directly, they would still be making plenty of money. All right. The way that the credit card is going to compute your interest rate is they use something called average daily balance. And every credit card that I've looked at, and sometimes I just look through random credit cards just to get information on this. They all use the same method, this average daily balance method for computing interest. Okay. And so the way that this works is they break the billing period into days, and they look at your balance at the end of each day. And so for a month, what they do is they average all of those balances together, and that's your average daily balance. Okay. So one way to think about that is if I make a huge charge at the beginning of the month, let's suppose I buy something for $1,000 and I sit on that for the whole month, they've loaned me $1,000 for almost a month, and then come my bill, maybe I pay it off, right? Okay. If somebody else buys a $1,000 item at the end of the month, they might have only taken out that loan for $1,000 for a few days before they get their bill. It doesn't make sense to charge the same amount of interest for somebody who had it for, say, 3 days and somebody who took out a loan for, say, 25 days, right? So they don't. What they do is they say, okay, if you loaned, if you bought something at the beginning of the month and you had a big balance, you will have that balance for many days of that month, so your average daily balance will be higher. So that's sort of the reasoning behind this. Okay, so what I want to do is I just want to look at an example here of a month statement. We'll look at a January statement on a credit card. And this isn't an actual statement. I just want to look at maybe something a little bit simplified and sort of pick apart some of the pieces so you can see how some of this stuff works. Okay, so what we do is we're going to have some transactions. we're going to start with a previous balance. So we're going to say that this person left $1,200 on their credit card from last month. And then on January 3rd, they bought gas for $40. And on January 8th, they made their December payment of $1,000. Okay. And then on the 15th, they bought gas again. And on the 25th, they bought groceries. And on the 29th, maybe they bought clothes. Okay. And that was it for the month. Okay. So their previous balance was $1,200. If you buy something for $40, it adds 40. Okay. If I make $1,000 payment, it goes down by 1,000. Okay. If I buy gas for 43, it goes up by 43. Then if we make a $291 purchase, then I take my balance of 283 and add the 291 and get 574. And then if we make another purchase of $197, our balance will be 771. Okay. For computing the average daily balance, instead of having all 31 days in January listed out and averaging those 31 numbers, the way that you can do an average is we can shortcut a little bit, right? So if I wanted to average, let's just look at, for example, averaging 1, 1, 1, 3, and 3. Okay, instead of adding 1 3 times and adding 3 twice, I could say, well, let's make this even more of them just to make it seem easier. If I wanted to average all these numbers together, right, we start by adding them up and dividing by how many we have. Okay, but I could say, well, I have 3 1s. So when I add up 1 3 times, I get 3 times 1. When I add up 3 6 times, I have 6 times 3. Okay, so when I have repeated values, instead of adding them over again, I can do repeated addition by multiplication. Okay, there are 9 things here. So that's what we're going to do here. Instead of listing out all the days, we're going to shortcut a little bit by saying, okay, if this balance was on 2 days, okay, then I can just multiply to shortcut instead of adding it twice, right? Instead of adding this 5 times, I'll just multiply it by 5. So we're going to compute how many days we have this balance, right? So from the 1 to the 3rd is 2 days. From the 3rd to the 8th is 5 days. From the 8th to the 15th is 7 days. I'll do some blue. Okay. From the 15th to the 25th is 10 days. From the 25th to the 29th is 4 days. And then the end of the month, we always want to be a little bit careful. If we just took 31 minus 29 and subtracted, we would get 2. But we want to count the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st. So we want all 3 days. So that our total number of days, if you add these up, adds up to the 31 days in January. Okay, so now just to help me with this whole averaging business, I'm going to take the balance and multiply it by days. Okay, so 1,200 times 2 is 2,400. 1,240 times 5 is 6,200. 240 times 7 is 1,680. 283 times 10 is 2,830. 574 times 4 gives me 2,296. And 771 times 3 gives me 2,313. Okay. And so now to find my average, I can just add up these numbers and divide by 31. Okay. So the average daily balance, well, here, I'll add this up as a total. So when I add that up, I get 17,719. So my average daily balance is going to be this sum, 17,719 divided by 31. Okay. And there is a slightly faster way to do this on your calculator, but I'm a little bit nervous of teaching something that seems a little bit complicated. Maybe we'll look at that when we get to statistics. Okay, so we ended up carrying an average of $571.58 per day. All right. Okay, now we have to figure out how the interest is computed. Okay. So the credit card has an annual rate, in this case, of 24%. And what we're doing here is we're looking at one single month. So just like we've done in the past when we were looking at like the amortization schedule, we want to say, all right, if I want to look at just 1 month, I have to break my annual rate up into a monthly rate. Okay, so the monthly rate is going to be 0.24 divided by 12. And in this case, that comes out very neatly. I'm going to leave it as a fraction, though, because when you're doing homework, it's a really good habit to leave things like this as a fraction when you type it in your calculator, because when it doesn't work out to a nice terminating decimal, if you round your rates, your interest rates, then your numbers are all going to be off by a little bit at the end, and then you get wrong answers, and you're like, "Why is this wrong? I did the right formula." And it's like, "Yeah, it's just rounding." Okay, so that's the way to avoid rounding error. Leave it as a fraction. Okay, so then our interest the interest charge is going to be this percentage of the average daily balance. Okay, so I have 0.24 divided by 12 times my average daily balance of 571.58. Okay, so we get $11.43. Okay. All right, so at the beginning of the next month, our statement balance assuming we don't have any late fees or anything like that, we're going to take our previous balance, 771, and add the interest rate. So the average daily balance doesn't really show up. Okay, if you look at your credit card statement, you don't see that as one of the lines. It might be hidden away somewhere, or they might not even show it to you at all, because it's only used to compute the interest charge. So if they tell you what the interest charge is, then they may not even feel the need to tell you what the average daily balance is, and you'd never see it. Okay. All right, so that's how interest is computed. Any questions so far? Okay, so when we look at an example like this, and we say, okay, you know, we were at the end of the month, I had $771 on my credit card. Interest was only $11. That doesn't seem like a big deal, right? It doesn't seem like that's very much. Okay, so that's kind of the, you know, there's an easy trap to get into where you think, well, that's not very much interest, it's not a big deal. Okay, so what I want to look at is I want to look at how much do things cost when you use your credit card, right? What is the actual cost? If I think about this as a loan, when I bought this gas for $40, how long does it take to pay off, and how much interest do I end up paying by the time it's paid off? And like I said, it doesn't really make sense to think about this as a loan that takes a certain number of months or years to pay off, because you're constantly paying your credit card and constantly making new charges. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at minimum payments, okay? Because if you paid off your entire credit card every month, you would pay no interest. So your $40 gas would cost you exactly $40. So what I want to do is look at the far end of the spectrum. What happens if you only make your minimum payments? Okay, and I've looked at a few different credit cards and their minimum payment terms, okay, and they're all a little bit different, okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at an example of a typical credit card. This is kind of a common one that you might see. This one actually came from an example terms of agreement from Bank of America. Okay, but there's nothing special about them. That this is how a lot of credit card companies do it. So this is how the minimum payments are computed. They will either charge you 1% of your balance plus the interest charges for the month plus any late fees, or $35, whichever is higher. Okay. So if I carry kind of a low balance, like if I look at this last one, okay, and I say, well, 1% of $771 is going to be $7.71. And if I add the interest to that, I'm looking at right around $19. They're not going to charge me $19. They're going to charge me just a straight $35. The idea is that if your balance is kind of low, just pay at least $35. Okay. We're going to look at an example where we carry a higher balance. So we use this other more interesting one. Okay. And if you carry a low balance, you're probably not the person that's really worried about the high, financing and interest fees. Okay. It's usually when you end up carrying a high balance and you're just making minimum payments for a while. That's where things rack up. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of a credit card with a $5,000 balance. We're going to use that 24% interest rate, which is fairly common. And we're going to use this minimum payment terms above. Okay. So if I want to look at the interest for 1 month, and just to make things simple, let's just suppose we have a $5,000 balance all month long. Okay. So we're going to use this as our average daily balance also. Okay, so if I had $5,000 for my average daily balance and I multiply by 24% over 12, right, 0.24 over 12, I'll get $100. So our interest charge is $100. Okay. So that's our interest charge, and then we have to add 1% of our balance. Okay, so I'm going to take 1% of the 5,000. So we have a $100 interest charge plus 1% of our 5,000 gives us $150. And since this is greater than $35, this is our minimum payment, right? So our minimum payment is going to be this $150. Okay. And let's suppose we make our $150 minimum payment on time, right? No late fees or anything like that. Okay. So then let's look at our new balance. Our new balance is going to be $5,000 plus the $100 in interest minus the $150 that we made as a payment. So our balance is now at $4,950. Okay. But here's what I want you to pay attention to. We paid $150, but our balance only went down by $50. Okay. That's the key thing here. We paid $150, but our balance went down by $50. Okay. Now, again, let's continue this example. Suppose we make no new purchases, no other transactions. So the next month, our balance was $4,950 the whole month. And we repeat the same thing. I'm going to take my interest percent of my $4,950, and I get $99 as my interest charge. Okay. So again, if I follow my formula, I have my $99 interest, and then I have my 1% of balance, and I come out with $148.50. And again, we make our minimum payment. So our new balance is going to be our previous balance, $4,950, plus the $99 in interest, and minus the $148.50 that we paid. So our balance is now $4,900.50. Okay. So again, we paid $148.50, but our balance only went down by $49.50. Okay. What I want you to notice is that 150 is 3 times 50. Okay. 148.50 is 3 times 49.50. So if we're only making minimum payments, we end up paying $3 for every dollar that you owe. That means that if you buy a pack of gum for $1, then you have to pay $3 for it to actually have it paid off, right? If you're only making these minimum payments. Okay. Now, different credit cards might be different, right? If your interest rate is not 24%, the story changes a little bit, but it's not going to change by very much. This process is the same. If you're only making minimum payments, you can expect to pay roughly 3 times as much for everything that you buy. All right. So like, if you're going shopping and you see something on sale and you're like, oh, that's 20% off, I have to get it now. And you throw it onto a credit card that you're only making the minimum payments on, it's like, oh wait, now triple the price. That's what you're actually paying. Okay. So that's the danger with credit cards. Okay. You can go from, if you paid off everything every month, then your $40 charge costs you $40. If you're only making minimum payments, that $40 gas costs you $120. Okay. And that's, that doesn't seem like a good deal at all. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit about credit cards and a little bit of warning there. In the homework, what we're going to do is look at picking apart some of this average daily balance and going through that and try and compute it. And again, I don't really have an expectation that any of you are going to bust out your credit card statement and compute your average daily balance. But the idea is by going further than you would go in your regular life, maybe it'll help kind of ingrain in the process so you understand what's going on better. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. Okay. All right. Any questions over credit cards? Okay. Well, then I think that's it for this week. Tomorrow, we don't have new lecture notes, so I'll still show up here at 9, but we'll just do problems, and I'm not going to record it and post it. It's just working on homework and homework problems, essentially. Okay. And then next week, I stop recording.